You just have to have a curious mind. What else? What else could be outsourced? I
Yeah.
always think about this, and I feel like a lot of people. I feel like in your audience probably would relate. Always start from something, right? And a lot of people come from no money, and then we all have sort of like, money problems, money programs that we come with, right? And we have to unlearn quite a lot of things as we grow.
Mm,
And for the
sure.
longest time, I'm like a little bit OCD. I like my house to be cleaned a certain way. I haven't outsourced this section of my life for a long
Mm,
time.
wow.
And then I had income to hire somebody, but I just like this trust and well, I don't know if they're gonna do a good job or not. But you know what? Once I did it, I could never look back, and I just was like, "Oh my gosh, why did I wait? I like, probably could have started years later, like
Sure.
earlier."
You're listening to the Accredited Investors Only podcast presented by Accredited Life.
Anna, welcome to the show. How you feeling today?
I feel great. How about you?
I'm feeling very good, very good. So I'm happy you're here and looking forward to this conversation. Let's start with introduction. Who are you? What are you doing? Why are you here? All that good stuff.
Sure. So my name is Anna Lee. I'm here just I always talk like talking to people, right? So sharing, my perspective of life, hearing others. That's something that always I guess ticks me in a positive way. In terms of my story, I was born and raised in Uzbekistan. It's a country that used to be a Soviet Union and it kind of collapsed and became its own country. I moved to United States when I was 21, and I came here with nothing, and I built my amazing sort of a American dream story here. And at this point, I own my own staffing company. I'm a real estate investor. I have dabbled into other couple of businesses that my husband and I run together. So I'm married, have 3 kids, and as far as my leisure time, if it's winter, I'm skiing. The rest of the time, I play pickleball.
Yeah, nice. Very nice. Well, geez, there's a lot to unpack there. That's a pretty awesome story, and it seems like a lot of different elements going on that we could dive into. Let's start with the outsourcing company. I mean, tell me about that. What is it? What does it do? How does it help people? Let's talk about that first.
Sure, I guess I have to like back into this just so how I even started it. It was all by kind of sheer accident. I was on the assignment with my whole family in Switzerland. I used to work for the pharmaceutical company. So I was there for 4 years, and my husband and I already dabbed into real estate. And one day I said, well, I wish we could have more deals, right? All of us in real estate want to have more deals. And I've heard about wholesaling, and I said, well, if we could have a couple of deals coming our way through wholesaling, that would be amazing. So I decided to, as I'm working full time, as I was stationed in Switzerland, I decided that I want to start my wholesaling company. And I realized I have zero time, and I needed some way of marketing and somebody following up on leads.
Mm,
And so I actually ended up looking for people that I can outsource, a few of the tasks to, such as cold calling and lead follow-up, whatnot. So I worked with a few agencies and wasn't really happy with the end result. The whole notion was pretty good. They'll train my VAs and they'll place them with me. Reality is there are kind of two types of the ways that you can source your people. I guess three types. You can source on your own. You can hire an agency. They'll probably charge a markup. They kind of sort of train them. And then the third type is just you just purely hire a recruiter who will just, do the outsourcing part for you, but then people work directly for you. So
mhm,
I think when I work with agencies, that middle position that I just explained, they have like a very high turnover.
mm,
So I wasn't really happy because I think virtual assistants were underpaid.
mm.
So they would either be like really bad quality or just leave the company. So and my yet another case when I just kind of was left stranded, VA left, the company couldn't find them, I couldn't find them. And then the VA came back to me 3 weeks later and said, listen, if you hire me directly for
Mm.
$4 an hour, I'm like, gosh, how much they pay you that
Yeah.
you're willing to come back for $4 an hour? And mind you, I've been paying 12, right? So
Wow.
Um, at that point, I kind of realized, listen, I definitely didn't want to rehire that person because just how he left, but I wanted to do something on my own. So I spent some time to do that, kind of nailed down the process, was very successful in that. And eventually, when I was in a few of the masterminds, I feel like some people were just continuously asking me questions, but how did you do
Sure.
that? Like,
Sure.
how about that? Right. So, like, but they all leave you. But, there's just a lot of questions. And, my people stayed with me and I had a really quality, process and quality people. So, I was like, I'm kind of tired explaining the same thing over and over. And I just decided I'm going to record a course
Mm,
and I'm going to put it all out there. And I honestly just wanted to save my time. I haven't thought of that as a business or anything like that. So I recorded a course. It took me 1 weekend. It's just like when you're so determined to, to
sure.
do
Sure.
something and get it over with.
Hmm.
I mean, I've never done anything in my life that fast, but I asked my husband, "Can you like take the kids for a weekend somewhere?" And I'll just like lock myself in the room and I do all this. So it wasn't anything fancy, right? I signed up for like a free Loom account and was
Mm,
limited to like a 5 minute Loom video. And
okay.
that made me get it down to the point where it's just all like information that you actually can use. There's
Yeah.
no fluff,
Yeah.
there's no intro, there's nothing else because I was limited to 5 minutes. So I'm like, I had to get it down to like section 5 minutes.
Wow.
So I recorded that. I placed it on one of the platforms for courses, and I reached out to my kind of community in my mastermind, and I said, "Listen, guys, like, can you just watch it and give me a perspective if it's helpful or not?" So, a few of my folks who were like fast rabbits, they got back to me and said, "Oh my gosh, I just like followed your protocol because the course is only 1 hour." And
Mm,
I had
nice.
80 candidates within 3 days. Like, this is
What?
amazing.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, for me, it's normal. I'm like, just like for me, it's nothing that I thought everyone is doing the same process, right?
Hmm.
They said you definitely have something there. Just put a price tag on it and just start selling. And I put a price tag on it and it just started selling with word of mouth.
Wow.
And then after I've accumulated enough people that like love the product, after that they came back to me and they said, "Listen, it's all great, but I'm also busy.
Sure.
Like, we didn't have time
Just
to
do it for me.
follow the protocol, right?" And then they're like,
Yeah.
"Can you please, like, do this for me?" And
Yeah.
I'm busy, I don't have time for that, but I already had, a team of VAs. I said, "Let me see if I can actually have them watch the course and follow the protocol, and maybe they would do that for
Wow.
me." So that's how it all started, and
It's like VA Inception there. That's it.
exactly, and then 2
That's
years
amazing.
later, I have a business, like, I was recently, tapped on the shoulder and asked if I wanna sell it, and at this point, it's one of those situations when it just happens so naturally.
Mhm.
You never knew that you're really good at it until somebody pointed this out, and it's a very easy, flowy business for me that I'm into, and I'm like, I'm not even interested in selling it, maybe one day, but,
Mm,
that's
yeah.
essentially my story
Yeah.
for the
Wow. That's amazing. I was gonna. You answered so many questions that were floating around in my head. I was gonna ask you. When you came to the United States, like, did you come out? Did you set out to be a business owner, or did that kind of just happen? Over time. Sometimes not everybody sets out for it. Sometimes it just happens naturally. And it sounds like for you, it wasn't really on the radar. It just kind of it happened, and it's worked out great, right?
I think I did always have an intent to be a
Mm,
business owner.
wow.
I
Okay.
almost had to walk through a journey of a corporate world in
Mm,
order to kinda in order to, like, really understand and feel what's good for me,
yeah.
right? I don't know if you ever, read An Alchemist by Paulo Coelho,
Yep.
but he
Yep.
had to go all the way to the desert to realize he had to come home, right?
Yeah.
So his, I guess, pot of gold or whatever he was looking for, was essentially at home, and I feel like we all have that home base
Mm,
in our hearts that, I remember when I was a little kid, and so, there was really no place for sort of kind of any type of business or free economy or whatnot, right? And then
mm,
when it collapsed, we had some like dabs of opportunities. So my dad started to be an entrepreneur, and my dad was like my model, right? So everything he liked, I kind of liked too.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was 7, I didn't know like what kind of skills I even have, but we had a lot of sort of like safety situations back home in terms of, your car could be stolen. So I thought of that as an opportunity. So as 7-year-old, I recruited two of my friends who were 6 and 5. And I went out to like all these older men who would park their cars nearby the like market bazaar, we call them, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, why don't we watch your car? You go
Mm.
shop. We'll
Yeah.
watch your car for an hour and
Yeah.
then like pay us whatever you want to pay us, right?
Yeah.
Few people kind of laughed at us, never paid us anything, but then I met somebody who actually was willing to pay. They thought it was cute. Let me just give them something. But I felt like this is how I was built. Like I was always looking for the opportunities, and I
Yeah.
think the business mind was always in my heart.
Mm.
I know it's not for everyone, for sure it's not for everyone, but when I came to United States, when you have zero, like when you really like we came here with minus $3,000 with my husband,
Wow.
like you have to start building something, for the credit. In order to buy a house, you have to have stable income, W-2. So I felt like my journey in corporate, which was about 15 years, was definitely something that helped me build myself. Again, going back to the alchemist, he had to walk that journey in order to come back. Like it wouldn't be probably right, or he wouldn't find his goal
Yeah.
if he didn't walk that path. So
Yeah.
I feel like for me it was probably the same. I had to walk that path and I gained a lot of knowledge along the way.
Mm.
And even in my, I've reached a pretty high career in my corporate life in the pharmaceutical world, being in the senior leadership, but it helped me a lot, like in terms of looking at how people work together, right? And I had to do my own share of hiring and firing and whatnot. So that skill still helped me now in the business that I do now. So I could never say like, I know that sometimes nowadays young kids, they're like, you know screw that corporate life, let's all become, Instagram
Oh
influencers,
God. Yeah. Yeah.
right? I wouldn't discount it. I wouldn't discount it because I truly am grateful for people that were on my way, all the mentorships and all of that, all of the mistakes that I did too. I mean, I'm just so grateful for that because all of that is a learning and stepping stone for me to, be great at what I do right now.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing. That's so it's in your blood. It sounds like it's always been a part of you, and it was going to come out eventually. But I love what you're saying. Yeah, I completely agree with you. With some people, it's just that's a right fit. You know what I mean? It's just like how entrepreneurship could be a really nice fit for some people. Corporate American could be a really good fit, and having that transition, having that period to learn the structure that comes along with that, and working with people and how to get tasks done, and being responsible for things and all, like that's a very important aspect. And to your point, I think, yeah, some people don't, who knows, with what they want to do and stuff like that, but I certainly wouldn't write it off, and I always think there's something to be gained from it. But that's awesome. That sounds like that was really in your blood, and was meant to be, and was going to happen whether you liked it or not eventually, right? Well, let's dive a little deeper into the VA side, because I want to make sure the audience understands it. I know a lot of like real estate investors have probably dabbled in it, and operate it, very successfully. But for the listener, for passive investors, I think there's a lot that they could probably gain as well to maybe make their lives easier. So let's start with like, what are well, first, what is a VA? What is a virtual assistant? I mean, just super basic, so we make sure everybody's on the same page. And then let's talk about like what they can do, what tasks they can do, what's the possibility, what's the limitations, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Essentially, VA is somebody who works for you virtually. I think that most of the people at this point know it's not a robot. I don't have to kind of bring that knowledge back to the table, but I think maybe most common misconception comes from that VAs are uneducated, or VAs are only there for maybe some simple admin tasks. We typically kind of talk about sourcing top 3% of the global sort of a talent pool, right? So if you think about it, for every role that we source, there are about 100 candidates that apply, and we'll present the top three candidates for somebody to choose from. So in the global economy, you have to look at this as a global opportunity. And probably one of the other misconceptions is that virtual assistants come from Philippines primarily.
Mm.
And I do agree that Philippines in the last 20 years, just simply because the country is their second native language is English. The country
Okay.
is pretty fluent in English. Not everyone. There's so many islands, more than 200 islands within the Philippines, right? So there are some areas that are rural and people may have access to some English, but maybe they're still, their accent is pretty strong. Maybe it's not going to work out for somebody to work here. But there are major cities in Philippines where it's so common, so prevalent for them. This is why about 20 years ago, major corporations in United States and UK and Australia and New Zealand started outsourcing their business processes to the call centers in Philippines. They pretty much built them there, right? So you remember that maybe 15 years ago, if you called Comcast, you probably were on the phone with somebody from India.
Sure.
And then eventually, and again, I'm going to dab into the accents a little bit because reality is we as Americans, we're slightly racist, right? We have preferences for
Mm.
accents, right? I have an accent myself, right? I sound a little bit Eastern European, and I know different kind of accents just through my line of work. But we have a preference, right? Everyone
Mm.
is excited to speak with a British person,
Mm.
but kind of nobody cares when they, call Comcast. They're so angry, and the person on the other line cannot understand them,
Mm.
or
Mm.
there's an accent barrier and they cannot understand. So
Yeah.
I think corporations at some point figured out that I feel like Filipino accent is a little bit better. It's softer. The people there are kind of like, um, customer centric and oriented, whatever the
Mm.
notion was. So a lot of the business process, so they call them BPO centers, right? So like business process outsourcing was moved to Philippines. In the last 20 years, they created an opportunity for folks in the Philippines to essentially get paid way more than they would get paid as, teachers, police officers, government employees, doctors even, right? They are getting paid way more. So a lot of the workforce, even if they have education in engineering, doctorate, whatever it is, they all switch to the BPO. So you actually have access to a lot of educated talent. And
Huh.
all of a sudden, all these people kind of work for BPO centers. Now, after pandemic, there was a huge wave when they realized, oh, I can actually work from home. So they all moved back to where they were originally because they typically tend to go to the BPO centers in major cities.
Okay.
And then they got back and they said, listen, I can actually be a virtual assistant and work on my own, right? So this is where this era of, virtual assistant influx to support, again, Australia, United Kingdom, and United States was easily available. But at this point, we hire virtual assistant in United States because
Okay.
anyone wants to work virtually. It doesn't really matter, right? So
Sure.
more around the cost of how much you're going to pay hourly,
Mhm.
right? Just to give you a perspective, if we're talking about a very entry level basic virtual assistant that will help you with admin tasks or maybe managing your calendar or whatever it is, right? In Philippines, it would have been $5 an hour. In Latin America, I would probably say between 5 to 7. In Egypt, probably 5 to 7. There are a few countries in Africa that I can probably even find somebody at 4. But in the United States, you're going to have somebody probably around 20 to 25. And
Mm.
at 20 to 25, you're looking at somebody who is more of a kind of executive level,
Okay.
right? They probably even work for somebody supporting an executive in a corporate setting. But now it's a mom that wants to be flexible and she wants to maybe spend like a few hours in the morning with the kid or maybe sending them to daycare and then be available by 3 o'clock. So we see a lot of those folks that want to be, you know, considered for these opportunities, right? So at this point, we kind of hire globally. One of my recent clients, she owns a company. She lives here, but she owns a company in Poland. She said, I kind of have partnership there, but I don't trust them. I feel like they always hire somebody that works for my partner, but I really need to have somebody that works for me, right?
Mm.
And you try to hire me somebody in Poland. And I was kind of challenged to hire somebody that doesn't speak English, because most of the time we hire somebody overseas that would speak English and that they work for an American employee or American company. But we just hired somebody who speaks Polish to follow our protocol and how we source, and they were placed locally there in Poland. So,
Oh,
like, nothing is off limit
yeah.
as we finding out. And recently we just launched the pilot, and working with a lot of subject matter experts here in the United States, where um, we are going to be starting a pilot on the fractional professionals, right? So imagine that you are, I don't know, maybe that you want to launch a supplement company, and you need that sort of like knowledge on the FDA approval of supplements,
Okay. Yeah.
right? You kind of don't want to hire a chemist full time. Like, as a startup, you probably don't have funds for that. So we're building access to those subject matter experts so that you can hire them for maybe 6 months, for maybe, I don't know, 20 hours a month. That's it.
Wow.
We want that sort of kind of employment and access to a great talent globally and here, in which, like, in different shapes of form, to be available for everyone.
Wow. That's unbelievable. Is there any limitations in task, or could you find somebody to do almost anything that can be done virtually? And I'm assuming that's the biggest limitation is it's got to be able to be done virtually on a computer and and through a phone, I guess too. But anything that that you have a hard time for, are there any like tasks that are so just more difficult to search for than others, or what's that look like?
I mean, they're just truly something that you have to have somebody here physically, your cleaners, your nannies,
Yeah, yeah.
like something that requires like physical help, a private chef that comes to your house and cooks for you. But if you hire somebody that's in your city that can ship some of the food prep for you, that's still possible, because we're dabbling into different type of environments. And I'm at the point where we're researching actually private fitness instructors,
Mm.
especially that have some sort of like nutrition background, because I really like to combine both of these.
Yeah.
Let's say you have access to somebody in Argentina, and maybe here in the United States, you pay someone, I don't know, 150, $200 an hour, depending on where you are in the United States. And maybe somebody in Argentina will charge you 50 to 75.
Wow.
And you could still have access to them virtually, right? So I feel
Yeah.
like fitness instructor, what's most important is accountability.
Mm,
Is
sure.
you if you don't have it, and you don't have that willpower, right? It's really hard for you to kind of keep going and keep going. But let's say you need that accountability for 6 months, because I feel like
Yeah.
once somebody helps you with that accountability for a certain period of time, then you probably can go on your own. You build up enough time for building that habit, then you can go out on your own. So at this point, we're actually trying to see what else could be outsourced. It doesn't what
Yeah.
traditionally being thought as I have to be in person, so, like, I have to go to gym,
Mm,
I
yeah.
have to person with my personal coach. But at this point, I feel like a lot of people have access to, I don't know, dumbbells or whatever. And like
Yeah.
most of the time, you hear that you don't really need a lot of heavy equipment. You can do a lot with
Sure.
sort of like body weight, in terms of you using your kind of own body and maybe a few dumbbells.
Yeah. Yeah. Resistance bands and things like that. And yeah. Wow. That's amazing. It's unbelievable. Like how much, because it sounds like your roots were in real estate. You started it to wholesale, but it's expanded now into so many different industries. It's really amazing.
You just have to have a curious mind. What else? What else could be outsourced? I
Yeah.
always think about this, and I feel like a lot of people, I feel like in your audience probably would relate. Always start from something, right? And a lot of people come from no money, and then we all have sort of like, money problems, money programs that we come with, right? And we
Hmm.
have to unlearn quite a lot of things as we grow.
Mm,
And for the
sure.
longest time, I'm like a little bit OCD. I like my house to be cleaned a certain way. I haven't outsourced this section of my life for a long
Mm,
time.
wow.
And then I had income to hire somebody, but I just like this trust, and well, I don't know
Yeah.
if they're gonna do a good job or not. But you know what? Once I did it, I could never look back, and I just was like, "Oh my gosh, why did I wait? I like, probably could have started years later, like
Sure.
earlier."
Yeah.
So I'd say my brain at this point is just thinking about, how do I maximize the quality of my time,
Hmm.
and how do I outsource as much as I can, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's travel planning, whether it's
Mm,
anything else. And one of the things that people always ask me, like, how do you decide? How do you decide what are you going to outsource? And I always say I have kind of two methods. One method is kind of create a list of everything that you do on a daily basis. Maybe
Mm,
journal,
hmm.
journal for a week, and then start separating your actions into two buckets. One bucket will have a $10 an hour task, and the other one would be $200 an hour task. And I purposefully don't create 50, 75 or buckets, whatever. I almost want you to say, no, that's a 10 or
Yeah.
that's a 200.
Okay.
And I'm trying to like use an example in real estate world. Let's say you have a fund, right? Let's say you run a syndicate. And I would say having a one-on-one time with your potential investor,
Mm,
that's probably a $200 an hour task because
sure.
you want to convert them, and they typically people invest in you. They don't invest
Yeah.
into, something on paper, IRR, whatever it is. They invest in you. So they want that face time. So that's a $200 an hour task. But if you need to prepare a presentation for that same call,
Mm,
that you have a notes or whatnot, right? That has to look fancy or whatnot. That's a
yeah. Yeah.
right? So, think of all the things in your life, right? And I just like separate them. And right away, you already have somebody who can do all of this for you. And the other thing I also say, it's a combination of sort of kind of like looking at this from the money perspective, but also from a joy perspective.
Mm,
Um, I'm that weird person that likes to do my own taxes. I love tax chat. I know a lot of people who hate taxes.
sure.
So for me, I also break it into two buckets of this bucket fulfills me and this
Mm,
brings my energy, right?
mm,
So
yeah.
you that same list and try to allocate things. I also have this weird thing where I love to go out when we have snow. We don't have that much snow because you're in the same location as I am.
Yeah.
Lately, we haven't had that much snow. But for me, going out and cleaning my driveway
Mm,
and just like fresh air. There's snow.
yeah.
I love snow. So I personally actually would never outsource this. I
Mm,
could actually have three boys and I still have to fight them. Who's going to do that? Right. But it's weird. It's like, it's not most commonly, most common activity that people would like to do. So you would outsource that most of the time. But for every individual, there's this one little thing that for
yeah.
some reason they actually like doing that. So don't outsource that. Like it
Yeah.
brings you joy. Don't outsource it.
Wow, that's amazing. What a mindset shift that is, and just like looking at things from a different perspective. Yeah, I mean, that's really amazing. So when somebody does that and they have, they're kind of thought about what they need and all, what does the process look like with you? You mentioned you have a course. I'm curious to dig in a little bit further on so they listen to the course and then they could do this on their own. And then you have options where they can work with you or you work with your team. So let's talk about that. Like if when somebody comes to you, what does the process look like?
Sure. They can go take a course and hire on their own. Again, the course would only take them about 1 hour to watch. And I integrated a lot of copying and pasting. This is how we
Nice.
do job descriptions. Just
Yeah.
replace it with few of your words, pasted.
Wow.
This is a Google form that we use. This is a questionnaire that we ask. Use that, right? So I want I want the process for you to be as easy as possible. The most time-consuming process is actually reviewing the candidates, because again, you're going
Sure.
to generate about 100 applicants, right?
Yeah.
Teach you there how to do it so that you don't end up wasting your time reviewing every single one of them, right? Because with the Google form, you can kind of filtrate and sort out, so you're not going to end up, reviewing all of them. But still, then you have to narrow it down to maybe 20, 25, still review them, and still have to interview them, right? So that's where the most time consumption comes in.
Mhm.
And if you're the person who is kind of beyond that, right? It's kind of like me cleaning, right? I used to clean, but at some point I was like, not enough. Like I no longer. I no longer. And then I switched. So I feel like if you're in the kind of in your lifestyle where you are ready to just pay for services, then you probably can come over to pay us for the sourcing service. And we have multiple sort of offering there. If
Yeah.
you're just looking for an admin VA or marketing VA, any type of sort of a lower level subject matter expert, That's one service, that's our base service. And then we offer a professional service because we have people that are just reaching out. I actually need to hire somebody here, like local manager,
Mm.
or we help a health startup to hire a NHR director, want to say somewhere in Latin America. So once you get to the levels of, manager, higher management, C-suite, that's a different level. That's the next step. And then, as I said, we just launched the pilot for the fractional specialist, and that's very sort of kind of nuanced. It's a unique approach. We build it tailored to your needs,
Huh.
but we do probably require some minimum because just that engagement has to require like some commitment, whether it's like 6 months or whatnot. But you don't have to commit to 40 hours a week, right? As I said, you could probably go for 5 hours a week or whatnot.
Gotcha. Great. So okay, so you do all that. You have your team, you have your person, and you feel confident. This is the right person and all. What are some tips to have success moving forward? Because I'm assuming you maybe gotta do some training. You gotta set some structure, all that kind of stuff. You've been doing this a long time. I'm sure you know which way to try to get the most success out of that relationship as possible. So what are some tips you have for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like one of the most common, it's like top 10 questions. And it comes from some of the experience actually working with VAs. If you hired a VA and they ghosted you, there's a reason for that. And more often than not, it's on us as leaders than on them,
Mm.
right? So you probably still would have some bad apples. It's inevitable when in a human business, and in humans sort of have their stages of life, right? I may be going through something or whatever it is, and I just may ghost you and whatnot. However, if you did the process right in terms of asking them the right questions and sourcing them right, in the end of the day, if somebody ghosted you, there are like few most common reasons why. You change their pay structures, like you advertise one rate, but as you interview them, you're like, how about, instead of $10 now, you start with 8.
Mm.
What's the point? You were already ready at 10. They applied at 10. They got what's the point of negotiating at this point,
Wow.
right?
Yeah, I'm
So
surprised anyone would do that. Yeah.
yes, that's like one mistake. The second part is there was zero time or very few, like very little time spent on onboarding and training. I do believe that the most successful VAs will come from a great leader that will spend enough time in onboarding and training.
Mm.
So that's the number two reason. Number three would be you thought that the job entails one thing, and that's how you created the job description, but then, it became something completely different,
Mm.
or you loaded them with 10 other tasks that you thought, but like, I need to outsource everything from my $10 bucket list, right? Reality is, if the skills are non-complementary,
Mm.
let's say you wanted them to do bookkeeping, right?
Yeah.
But then they started doing bookkeeping, and then all of a sudden you're like, "And can you do sales for me, please?" These two skill set are
Wow.
like, so kind of polar opposites.
Sure.
A bookkeeper, most likely, I have great attention to details. I strive in data analysis. I strive in being maybe introvert, right? Like
Mhm.
I like kind of to be on my own. If you put me in sales,
Mm.
I have to all of a sudden talk to people. I'm uncomfortable, right?
Mhm.
So, you don't set people to fail, right? Just be mindful of what skill set are complementary. And if you did bookkeeping and now you're doing maybe some sort of data analysis, well, that's complementary. That's okay. And you ask them, and you presented that ahead of time. So unrealistic expectations and then the change in that in the requirements can also drive them to just, ghost you, right? Some of the cultures, specifically like in Philippines, people really don't like to disappoint you.
Mm.
So the reason they're ghosting you, and this is very hard for us as Americans to understand, you can just come to me and tell me, like, share your
Sure.
things, tell me about it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really work for their culture because they really don't like to disappoint you. So
Mm.
they think I would rather quietly leave you
Mm.
than tell you that this is not what I signed up for.
Mm.
It's
Sure.
really hard to have that feedback for somebody that you work and the seniority for them matters a lot, right? So coming to my boss and tell my boss like,
Mm.
no, I mean we agreed for $10 an hour. We agreed that I'll be a bookkeeper, but I'm required to do sales. it's not something that I can do, right? So
Yeah.
that's the number one big thing, right? This that the expectations have to match to what you initially sort of advertised. And I would say that if you ever had like unsuccessful hire in terms of the virtual assistant, the biggest thing I want to go back to would be training and onboarding. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the rule of seven in marketing, but it's you have to repeat a message to your client 7 times different ways in
Mm.
order for them to take action.
Wow.
Well, I approach training the same way. I have to repeat myself 7 times
Mm.
for them to not only process the knowledge, understand it, and actually embody that so that that's a second nature for them. If
Yeah.
I'm as a leader setting myself expectation, I have to repeat myself 7 times.
Mm.
I'm not going to be disappointed if they're going to be asking me third time,
Mm.
did you say it works?
Yeah.
I'm just going to be like, oh, that's number 3.
Yeah.
I'm pretty close
Check.
to number 7.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. I love that.
At that point, I would say that, I'm pretty happy. I'm proceeding in their success.
Yeah.
They're not stressed and scared that they're asking me the same question 3 times.
Mm.
And I can pretty much start my hiring with, it's okay. You can ask me the same question 7 times.
Yeah.
And I almost like open the door for them. And at this point, they don't feel scared. They feel open, open conversation channel. And the beauty part about this, you don't have to you don't have to teach them and tell them 7 times about everything. Because when you source somebody, same thing with bookkeeping. You don't have to kind of tell them about different types of records or how to use Excel. That's a given. They came with that experience. However, if you're going to tell them that this specific transaction, I consider that marketing, while the other business owner maybe consider that as an admin expense. That is very unique to my business. So maybe I have to repeat that 7 times. Because for me, maybe it's so much vastly different from any other business. I have to repeat this 7 times. But if you know that, you're going to position yourself for success. You're going to position your VA for success. And it doesn't have to be VA. Like in the corporate world, it's the same thing. I don't know if you've ever worked in the corporate job setting, especially right out of school. You come in, you're like, your eyes are wide open. You're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? Nothing at work seems to be the same as I learned in school. Right. And then after a certain repetition, you kind of feel like, oh, I'm getting it. Now I'm embodying the knowledge, right?
Sure.
Now we don't have to think about this. So if we know about this as leaders and set up the expectations for ourselves, I think we're going to be very much successful in retaining talent.
Yeah. Wow. That's gold right there. You know what I mean? And it's just kind of everything you said. It's common sense, but it's like you have to hear it. You know what I mean? It's really good information. Because I'm sure, common sense isn't always common, and people might be doing things that are affecting the relationship and things and maybe not even realize it, so it's a kind of taking a step back and looking at that process. And I think on the opposite end that works as well, because then if you start to go over 7 times, maybe okay, this isn't the the right fit, that kind of thing. But what a mindset and perspective shift to just to come into it knowing it's going to take time. You know what I mean? You got to trust the process, and you got to have that kind of collaborative, don't be afraid to come and ask. And I love that. That's kind of like in sales, like you got to know how many no's you have to hear in order to get to a yes, because then it makes you mentally just feel better. Like every time you hear a no, you're one step closer to getting the yes. So that's awesome. Let's talk about real estate for a little bit. We talk about it so much on the show. I feel like I gotta ask, but you mentioned being in Switzerland, starting a wholesale company. Like that's crazy. Were you doing that in the States? I'm assuming. I don't know anything about Switzerland and real estate. I'm assuming you weren't doing it there. So God, that's what brought you into the real estate world, and are you still dabbling in it today? And what's that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, my dad influenced me a lot in that. He was the one who introduced me to Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Okay. Wow.
That
Nice.
was in the midst of my corporate career, right? Like I
Okay.
had hunger to go up the ladder
Mm.
and it's working well and I got paid well, right? So, and I had an assignment in Switzerland. But right before the Switzerland, my husband was actually working for a company that was I think their customer base was in Russia. It was like luxury goods that they were sold to customers in Russia. And it was the first wave of sanctions. So the
Mm.
business started doing pretty poorly. And my husband was working for that company. And at some point, it kind of looked like the company's going to shut down. He's going to be out of job. And at that point, we saved just a little bit of money. It was not enough to, maybe spend it for the rehab, but it was enough to acquire a very small property in Philadelphia and try out flipping.
Mm.
Right before we moved to Switzerland, we kind of consciously sat down and had a conversation. We said, one of us has to go out in business. Like, this is your golden opportunity. The company's shutting down. Instead of looking for another job, we're already there. Like, that's our ticket for both of us, right? So we spoke with a couple of people that were doing something similar here locally. We didn't pay for the course. We didn't know anything what we were doing. And sometimes I feel like this is the best thing. Like, it's better to actually sometimes not to know and just like like go into one item in real estate and just try to master that.
Nice.
So collectively, what we decided, we said, listen, even if you fail on your first flip and let's say lose, because see, with flips, you cannot really lose so much, especially when you acquire pretty low, sort of kind of like property that doesn't cost much. So we said, even if you lose $20,000, we're going to treat it as an education
Mm.
because
Yeah.
the courses that you pay for, you'll never have a hands-on experience. So let's treat that as an education and let's go for that and see and figure this out. So he had his first flip. He sold it. He made like $15,000
Nice.
for that. Like for the acquisition price of 50, for him felt great. He
Sure.
was ready to pay for that lesson and he got paid for that lesson. That's just, the best feeling possible. And that's when I got offered an opportunity to go to Switzerland. He was like, dang it, I just got into this. Like, it was exciting. I wanted to continue to do that, but we couldn't pass on the opportunity to go to Switzerland because, my company was relocating the whole family. My kids had a chance to go to international school and
Wow.
study with, it's Switzerland. So
Yeah.
it's full
Oh my
math.
God. Yeah. No brainer. Yeah.
No, I was so jealous because my kids had ski Fridays. That's when the school sent the whole school to ski on a Friday in the whole winter time. And they had their own train to do that. Like, it just like, what? It is just certain things were super crazy. And like, can't really pass on that opportunity. And I had an amazing team that I was working with. I also grew in my corporate career. So we said, we'll figure something out. My husband wasn't allowed to necessarily work in Switzerland. So he kind of transitioned into like a stay-at-home dad, but that itch for flips was there.
Mm.
So he said, listen, your dad is kind of our boots on the ground. He can help me out with some of the projects. Maybe I'll start buying houses off of the auctions.
Mm.
And he's gonna be the boots on the ground. We'll partner up and whatnot. So that's exactly what we did the 4
Wow.
years that we were there. He
Wow.
would find, houses on Hubzu, auction.com, sometimes off of the MLS because he also got his license. And then we would provide funding and the deal. And he already knew exactly what to do in terms of the general contracting, whatnot. So my dad would be just like a project manager, making sure that everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so he did like quite a lot of flips as we were still in Switzerland.
Yeah.
There only be the one or two times where he actually have to flew back
Mm.
to, I want to say one time the title company was giving us a hard time and we had to like physically be here.
Mm.
But
Sure.
most of the time we didn't even have to fly back.
Wow.
No, most of these were just happening. My dad was just like cashing in the checks. He had a power of attorney and whatnot. So it was amazing. And the beauty about this, my husband really only worked, it was because of the time difference. Sometimes he had to get on like a couple of calls at like 8 p.m. our Swiss time,
Mhm.
where it's kind of morning time in the United States, and that was it. So he was also able to enjoy his life, playing tennis, skiing.
Yeah.
And I was kind of
Yeah.
like
With the
jealous of all
kids.
of my family members because I still had to work. But then my age was still there. I really wanted to become a business owner. So that's when I decided to start that wholesaling company. And I think I started it 18 months prior us moving back to United States. So yeah, I worked from, let's say, 9 to 6. I
Mm.
spent my time from 6 to 9 with my kids. We had dinner, we went for walks. Everyone walks every day in Switzerland. So we did that. And at 9 p.m., my kids went to bed. And 9 to 12, I was working in my business.
Wow.
'Cause I
That's
still had to
unbelievable.
do some follow-ups. I still had to convert some clients and whatnot. And I learned a ton. It didn't start right away. I feel like for 6 to 9 months, I didn't have any closed deal. I was just consuming knowledge and I was learning how to do that. I was not a salesperson. I'm more that analytical person, right? So I had to learn that skill and become comfortable in that because, unlike VAs and employees, as an entrepreneur, we do it all,
Mm,
right?
sure. Yeah, you got to wear all the
We
hats.
do a little bit of sales and everything, right? So, and that's probably one other misconception is when we are entrepreneurs, we tend to be more ambitious in nature and we're okay doing it all. And it's our common misconception that an employee has the same drive as we do. They don't.
Mm,
It in the end of the day, for a lot of people, it's just another job.
yeah.
So they just want to do what they were hired for.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Well, what a great way to end the episode. You mean inspirational, motivational. Yeah, it's like when there's a will, there's a way. And you really have an amazing way of reframing situations for the positive, and to look at it. I love what you were saying, where it's even if you lose money and on that first one, it's an education and all. I mean, it's just such a great way to reframe it, along with everything else you were saying about just training people and, if they have questions and all. So this has been an amazing episode, a great topic. I think that really will resonate with people. And you mentioned it earlier about like just the freedom of time. That's something that's so important to this audience. So, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me. If people want to learn more about what you do and get in touch, how can they do that?
People can follow me on LinkedIn. They can find me, Anna Lee, Outsource Your Tasks. Or if you want to, maybe even like we offer the free brochure on like top 25 tasks that you can outsource to a virtual assistant. So go to our website, outsourceyourtasks.com. You can sign up either for our newsletter or just kind of follow us. And once you actually in our mail list, every week we're sending out featured VAs. So sometimes I feel like people are kind of not ready because they didn't had a feel for what it's like how do they sound, what do we offer.
Mm.
Sign up to our email list and you'll watch who we typically spotlight and maybe one day you actually would need to hire somebody.
Wow. Cool. Anna, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was really nice talking to you.